welcome to this episode of Tuesdays with a Disability Policy for All. I'm starting a new type of program called Research for All to make research more accessible to people with disability. Today I'm interviewing John Butterworth and Jean Winsor from the Institute for Community Inclusion. They have a website called StateData.Info that shares many years of employment data about people with intellectual and developmental disability. It has data for each state and also for the entire country. Thank you for joining us today. What data is on StateData.Info?
Oh, it's a big question. The data on state data goes back over 30 years now. We've been collecting it. And because no source is perfect, we try to use data from a variety of different places so that we can tell the story of employment as well as we can. At the very core is a survey that we've been doing with states for over 30 years. That's our national survey of IDD agency employment and day services. And we ask states how many people participate in services that lead to 4 different outcomes. One is obviously integrated employment. That's kind of the heart of the project and what we're trying to get better at. But we also collect data on the amount of people that spend time in facility-based work services, sheltered work, and similar kinds of work situations. And in non-cert work services, both people who get services to be in a program setting, a traditional day service, and people who get supported to be in activities that are in the community, that take place in the community. So that's kind of the heart of what we collect, but we also collaborate with the National Core Indicators Project because they let us be more specific about employment outcomes, both for the country as a whole and for individual states. Things like types of jobs people are in, the number of hours they work, the amount that they're earning in those jobs. So National Core Indicators lets us talk about a little bit about how good jobs are for people. But then we have we use a bunch of other sources, but 2 other really critical sources. We analyze data from the state vocational rehabilitation agencies because vocational rehabilitation is such an important part of people's path to employment in most states. And then we use a survey called the American Community Survey, which comes from the National Census. And the American Community Survey tells us what employment looks like for everybody. And we particularly look at 3 categories. We look at people who don't have disabilities, and then we look at data for people with any disability. And then we look at a category called people with a cognitive disability, which is not specifically people with an intellectual disability. It's much bigger than that, but it gets us a little closer to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and what their outcomes might be like.
How can people with disability and families understand the information shared through the state data info?
That's a great question. We at State Data, we really feel like data is power, and we want to give that power to as many people as possible so that they can help inform and make policy and systems change. And we know just from our interactions with people over the last 20 years around state data that many are using it to make change in their state. And it's a really strong resource that they use to be able to talk to their legislators, to be able to talk to their local school boards about why things need to be different at a local level. We encourage states also that we work with to make data available on individual outcomes. And some states have publicly made this data available so that job seekers and families can look at how well specific employment providers or parts of their state are doing at helping people to work and spend time in the community. Other research that we've been involved in has shown that this is a best practice in supporting more people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families to choose integrated employment as a part of their life. And I think that's such an important piece. A lot of times people are really anxious or afraid. Data makes adults in our nation as a whole a little anxious. And I think one of the things we really want to do is make it so that people know it's a tool. It's a piece that they should be using and can be using. We work really hard with our project advisory committee, and ICI also has an advocacy advisor to help make our data accessible and to really think about the types of products that we can be developing to help people as they're working and advocating in their community and for their own lives. We have a series of infographics that uses words, pictures, and numbers to help explain key data points. And we recently added 5 key questions that can be answered from our data on the State Data homepage of our website. And we think those are really exciting tools and opportunities. But I will also say we are open to questions. We love it when people reach out to us and ask us questions about our data or say, can you help me find this data point? I'm really interested in this for my state. I'm going to talk to my legislator on the Hill, and I really want to be able to talk about this and have some data points. And we always want people to reach out to us and are really accessible and love to talk about this. So we're so excited to have another opportunity to share this today.
Let me highlight a few things. I think the first is, and this isn't recent, but it's something that's really driven a lot of our work, is states are really different from one another in terms of the extent to which people are likely to work. And that tells us a few things. It tells us that how a state approaches employment and talks about employment, collects data on employment, makes it a critical priority in their day-to-day work, has a big impact on whether people have a chance to work or not. And when I say it varies a lot, the states that are doing worst on our national survey only have 4 or 5% of the people who get any kind of day service who are getting an integrated employment day service. And then at the other end, there are states that are 40 to as much as 80% of the people who get some kind of day service or getting a service to support them to be in an integrated job. So it tells us we need to learn from those states, and it's driven a lot of our work with states across the country to help change policy and strategy. And I think it also tells us that what we expect of people, what we think that they're able to do, is a really critical part of what the outcome is. So if a state really believes in employment, it becomes a critical part of the conversations the case manager has with people that they work with. It becomes a critical part of how the state looks at whether they're doing a good job or not. It becomes a critical part of how they interact with the organizations that provide employment supports and other kinds of day supports in their state. So that piece, that states have shown us that they can do a whole lot better and get close to that goal of people working as much as people who don't have disabilities. The second part of that is a small piece of data that comes from the National Core Indicators Project, and it's been pretty consistent over the now maybe 8 or 10 years, Gene, that we've been tracking that particular data point. National core indicators, if people are not working in an integrated job, National Core Indicators asks, would you like to? And about 50% of people every year, half of the people say, I would want to work in an integrated job. So that's a whole lot of people for us to start with if we want to create change. Half of the people who aren't working say that they want to work. The other part of that data point is they then follow up and say, so if you want to work, do you have a goal in your service plan? And it varies a little bit year to year, but it runs about 30%. So only maybe a third of the people who say they want a job say that they have a goal. That strikes me as, when we talk about communicating expectations and supporting people in their visions, that says we have to do a whole lot better in that, then change the way we hear people and and act on the things that they ask us for. At the heart of it, it's, are we giving people a chance to really expand their experiences and talk about and do a good job of defining their goals, particularly employment? And a whole lot of people who aren't working say they want to be working. If we could help them along that path, we'd get a long way towards the goal.
Thank you, John and Jean, for your time, and I look forward to talking with everyone next month. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.